All right, well, I'll start with an introduction of myself. My name is Max Brown. I'm a senior at the University of Washington. I'm majoring in political science. And my purpose here today is to essentially chronicle kind of my own experience growing up with the hip-hop music scene in Seattle. First, I'll start with just my own musical background, and then I'll kind of talk about how I got introduced to the world of hip-hop, and then I'll kind of talk about, more specifically, the Blue Scholars and the rise of mass-line media and how the local Seattle hip-hop scene has sort of come to be in my own perspective. So starting with my own musical experience, I grew up in Queen Anne with my parents, and they were of the baby boomer generation. And so what that means in terms of musical what they gave to me was a real appreciation for the sort of flower power aspect of music. Things like Jimi Hendrix, you got the Led Zeppelin, Janis Joplin, the Eagles, the Who, the Guess Who, Yes, all those guys. That's pretty much where I came from. As a young person growing up, I was mostly constricted to the older classic rock genres. I would say that was pretty much my musical experience well into junior high school. For me, hip-hop never really was a musical category. I never had an appreciation for rap or any of the derivations thereof, be it from the dirty South, back east or West Coast, any of that stuff. I had no idea. I would say the one exception is in 6th grade, I did end up purchasing Jay-Z's Hard Knock Life. That was my first official kind of foray into the world of rap and hip-hop, but other than that, absolutely nothing. And then sophomore year of high school, my friend John Krakowski, aka DJ Blue, introduced me to this little band called Atmosphere. And this is a hip-hop artist from the Midwest, out of Minnesota. And John told me that he had a very different take on hip-hop. And so we ended up going to go see this hip-hop show at the I Spy Theater. And that was, I was a sophomore in high school back then. I think I already said that. So we go to this little tiny theater. It's in the basement of this big industrial complex. The I Spy is now closed. There was no, this is before the smoking ban. So you go down to this little tiny crowded room, and there's one fan overhead for ventilation purposes, and the fan didn't work. But the good thing was the hip hop was amazing. It was a lot different from my kind of conception of rap and hip hop as it stood at that time. I was used to rap or hip hop being mostly about the guns, and there's drugs, a lot of misogyny, and that wasn't something that really appealed to me. What really struck me as different about Atmosphere was it was a very much more introspective style of hip hop. He was talking about things that were very personal and not what would usually be considered on the radar for the mainstream. So from my good experience with Atmosphere, I went on to have a fine appreciation for artists like Sage Francis, Aesop Rock, let's see who else, the Common Market, a lot of really interesting, kind of more introspective-oriented hip-hop. So I continued sort of in that angle until my freshman year at the UW, where once again my friend John Krakowski introduced me to some of the local Seattle hip-hop. He gave me this CD with the band Blue Scholars on it, and I sat down, I put it in, I listened to it, and we immediately decided to go to a show. They were planning to play a show, the Blue Scholars, at the Hub, and this was in February 3rd of 2006, and they were playing in the Husky Den, which, if you've ever been to the UW, is essentially just an offshoot of the cafeteria. There were just cafeteria tables lined up against the walls, a little tiny stage. The stage was about a foot off the ground from where we were all standing, and that was my first live experience with the Blue Scholars. From then, I kind of followed the Blue Scholars, ended up going to a show on May 12th of 2006, that same year. It's at the Heckhead Pavilion, and the Blue Scholars ended up playing with the likes of Mos Def, United States Electronica, which are bands that are much more nationally acclaimed. So for me, the Blue Scholars kind of took their local appeal from the cafeteria and the Hub to a little bit more of a national level with the Beats, Chords, and Comedy concert. From there, in June 3rd of 2006, the Blue Scholars at the Showbox had a mass line release party, which was essentially kind of a combination of all the local Seattle artists, being Common Market, the Blue Scholars, and Abyssinian Creole were the three that they initially started out with. And the whole purpose of the Massline media launch was to have a record label for the very unique style of Seattle hip-hop that Blue Scholars and their kind were bringing out kind of the public scene. And what really strikes me about this is the Blue Scholars are not only interested in having very intense introspective work, but they also talk a lot about social issues. They're very socially conscious, talk about poverty, inequalities, and other things like that in the Seattle area that you don't generally see in either the mainstream or some of the other underground hip-hop styles like Atmosphere that I've mentioned before. So my experience with the Blue Scholars sort of culminated in September of 2006 when they ended up opening for Kanye West at Bumbershoot in Seattle Center. And that was really amazing for me because these guys have gone from the cafeteria to kind of a UW, like a bigger stage, and now they're working with, they're opening for Kanye West, and this is also in conjunction. Tribe Called Quest was at the '06 Bumbershoot, as well as Atmosphere, which I mentioned earlier. So I guess I kind of want to conclude by talking about three elements of the Blue Scholars that I find really appealing and it's really different about them, and how those elements sort of work for and against them when they're trying to sort of move their perceptions of people's hip hop beyond, or people's perceptions of hip hop beyond kind of the traditional categories. So the one thing I think that they bring that's really interesting to hip-hop is their sort of intellectualism. Both DJ Sabzi and MC Geologic of the Blue Scholars are former UW students, which strikes a chord with me. And so what they do is they use a lot of more advanced sort of social concepts in a lot of their work. For example, they talk about, in one of their songs, they have a reference to Hegel, who is sort of a predecessor to Marx and this kind of socialist theory. And I think that's cool because it brings, kind of an interesting intellectual dimension to hip-hop that I hadn't personally experienced before. And that's good. I also think it kind of works against them because it's hard to be talking to a lot of people who don't have any idea about Hegelian social theory. If you're trying to get your message out, it's really hard to appeal on a mass level to people who haven't experienced that before. So another thing that they bring to their hip hop is their kind of localism. In which case, what I mean by that is they talk a lot about our local kind of elements: Shoreline, U District, the CD, Renton, Seattle downtown, all these things. And so that's cool because for me, living in Seattle, growing up in Seattle, I really appreciate that, like an artist talking about my community. That's awesome. I think it works against them because if you're not from Seattle and the Blue Scholars say something like, yeah, this is deep, like the drive from Renton to Shoreline, you're not going to know what they're talking about unless you've driven from Renton to Shoreline and had to do the downtown thing. And so my point is, I think it worked for and against them. The third element that I'll talk about is their sort of social orientation. And so they take on a lot of social issues as centerpieces in a lot of their works. Their most recent release, CD Bayani, has a song on it, 50,000 Deep, which references directly the WTO protests in Seattle in 1999. And once again, this is cool because, for local Seattle kids, they can really connect on a much deeper level to the Blue Scholars. But this works against them once again because once you get out of Seattle, if you don't have any idea about the WTO protests or, you don't know what's going on with the local Seattle scene, this song is more just kind of confusing. Like, you don't know what he's talking about, you don't know where he's going, or what the subject matter even is. So I'd say that that'll conclude my my discussion of hip-hop. And so that's what I see the Blue Scholars, a really unique driving force on the Seattle music scene. I'm really excited to see where they go.